Hi, friends. I took a break for the summer guest podcast series here on the podcast, which I hope you listened to and enjoyed. Those are some short, bite-sized podcast episodes that will bring some good encouragement to you as you kick off the school year. But now I am so excited to be back for season 10 of the podcast. Today's episode will give you a little behind-the-scenes family update. Then I'm answering your questions. I am so glad to be back with you in your earbuds here on Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology. Let's get started. Welcome to Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology, a series of interviews with real-life homeschool moms, dads, and other educators on all sorts of topics that affect our lives as homeschool parents. I'm Amy Sloan, a second-generation homeschool mom of 5, and I am so delighted that you are here. Here on Homeschool Conversations, we'll discuss educational philosophy, family life, and more. Come chat with us. So guys, I took a break for the summer guest series, but I'm excited to be back for season 10 of the podcast. I have already recorded at least 10 super encouraging conversations that I can't wait to bring your way this fall. I think this season is going to be especially inspirational and encouraging, but with plenty of practical tips as well. Now, the past few seasons, I've kind of had this listener Q&A episode tradition to kick off a new season. In the past, I've typically had one or more of my teen girls help me as guest co-hosts, and I was planning on doing that again this year. And it's just one of those things that sometimes the coordination of schedules and all of that, it just got to be a little bit too much. I may be in the hospital with my youngest son, Isaac, for a few days this upcoming week, and I just knew I needed to take this minute while I had a free moment. There was a little bit of quiet in the house, and I needed to just go ahead and record this episode by myself. So it's going to be a little different than other episodes you've heard in the past. It's just me, but it has some questions from you guys as well. So you can consider yourself a bit of a guest co-host. The rest of the season will return to our traditional interview style of the podcast. And I have folks who are going to be talking on topics as widely different as literature or science, kindergarten, middle school, high school, and what it's like to be a veteran or a retired homeschool mom. So there's going to be something for everyone, lots of really good perspective to share. One thing you can do to help me and help the podcast is to make sure you have subscribed to the podcast wherever you're listening right now. And if you would take a moment to leave a rating and review in your podcast app, that would be so helpful. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I'll send you my Abolition of Man webinar for free as a thank you. So I really appreciate that. And of course, you can always just take a screenshot of your podcast player, share it to your social media stories, tag me, and tell your friends that they don't want to miss all the fun of Homeschool Conversations. So I promised a brief family update first. So I guess many of you probably already know that Isaac, my youngest son, was diagnosed with leukemia last fall. It has been a long, hard year, but we are persevering by God's grace. Last school year ended in a difficult way. Isaac actually was in the hospital for most of May, and so our entire family kind of limped into the summer. Normally, at the end of the school year, I have an all that's left list. We like to finish strong. I had made those lists for my kids this year, but by the time I got back from the hospital with Isaac and we were just all kind of physically and emotionally recovering from the year, I eventually just declared us done. And I was like, you were declared righteous, kids. And we just all needed it just to stop. I did do some work with Isaac through the summer, little here and there, and we built up his reading stamina as well. But for the most part, we just really needed a bit of a break. My oldest son was out of state living in a different place for the summer as he had an internship, which was a great opportunity. The rest of us helped throw a church wedding. My husband and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary, and we had the opportunity to visit with several different members of out-of-town family who came to see us, and that was really, really special, especially since Isaac hasn't been able to travel to see family over the course of his treatment. So this upcoming school year, my oldest son, Joshua, is set for his second year at university as an electrical engineering major. Emma is in 12th grade. Sophia is 9th. Grace is 7th. And Isaac is 4th. Emma is going to be pursuing full-time dual enrollment, plus she's working on a super exciting senior thesis, kind of capstone project for our homeschool, and is also doing some ancient literature with me and her sisters. She continues to take violin, and you may be interested in hearing the podcast episode or watching the video Emma did with me earlier this year where we discussed our year of Shakespeare. So that was what we did last school year. It was really fun, and I had a great time chatting with Emma about that on the podcast and on YouTube. Sophia requested several outsourced classes this year, so she's actually going to be taking biology, geometry, Spanish, and literary analysis outside the home at various homeschool classes. And then here at home, I will be facilitating her humanities and her ancient literature, great books, along with her sisters. And Sophia continues with her ballet. Sophia is the youngest sister, but she is already taller than her oldest sister and is coming for Sophia. So that will be something I will be keeping an eye on this year. She is also taking a writing class outside the home like she did last year, but most things are going to be here at home with me. So she's continuing her algebra studies, doing humanities and ancient lit with her sisters. I'm really excited to be teaching a logic class using the art of argument from Classical Academic Press. I will be doing that with Grace and a few other young ladies here in our area. I have done this with the older siblings as well, and it's really just a delight to resume that logic. I'm looking forward to doing that with her this year. She's going to be doing science in the ancient world with Isaac. I actually wrote a little bit about this new to us curriculum on my website a few weeks ago. And Grace also does ballet and piano. Okay, wow, we're down to the youngest son, Isaac, 4th grade. He is continuing his treatment for leukemia, but I am hoping to have a bit more, or at least work towards a bit more of a full load with him this year in his homeschool. We'll see how that goes. So we're going to continue with Math with Confidence. Level 4 this year. We have loved the Math with Confidence program by Kate Snow, and I'm really excited to resume that with Isaac this fall. He is continuing to read with his eyes each day, and I'm going to be getting back into the reading journal phase with him. It is something we intended to begin in 3rd grade, and of course, all the hospitalizations and treatment last year threw that off, but we're going to go back and start and try again this year. I have written about our family's approach to reading journals before, both in the early years and as they get older. So definitely go to humilityandoxology.com and search for reading journals. I have some free printables there as well. We're continuing with All About Spelling. I really recommend the All About Learning Press resources. If you have any child who is struggling with reading or spelling, I find that All About Spelling has been hugely helpful for a couple of my children. Isaac as well will be doing ancient history with his older sister, Song School Latin. His oldest sister Emma is going to be helping with that as well. And then the Science in the Ancient World with Grace. And I do hope to add in the first writing and rhetoric book later this fall after we finish the next phase of treatment. I've really enjoyed the writing and rhetoric program from Classical Academic Press. I've done that with all of the older kids, and I can't wait for Isaac to be able to enjoy it too. Okay, so I had promised to give a little bit of an update on our family and our homeschool, so there is just a quick little run through. If you want to see some of my all-time favorite homeschool resources and curriculum, many of those are rounded up at humilityanddoxology.com/favorites. I have a curated list at christianbook.com. You can find it there. You can also always send me a DM on Instagram or email me if you have any questions about any of the subjects I mentioned or just want to learn more about homeschooling. And of course, for these things and other things I'll mention, I will try to include as many links as I can remember in the show notes for this episode. Oh, I should also mention, I mentioned the ancient literature with Emma, Sophia, and Grace, and I wanted to discuss that a bit more. I'm super excited about this. Mr. Wes Callahan was one of my high school teachers as a homeschooler way back in the day, and there are actually recordings of lectures he gave on the great books of Western culture, and so I'm going to be watching those with my girls, and we're going to try to keep up with the reading and kind of stay on the same track with our reading and discussion. And so we started that the first week we had back to school. It was both the nostalgia factor for me seeing Mr. C, but also it's just incredible content and a joy to be able to share some of these great works of literature with my girls. And I know it's going to be special for them as well. So if you want to just sort of keep up with me on this sort of personal level through the year, definitely follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Humility and Doxology, all those places. And then if you want to attend live hangouts and discussions, you can find me in Made to Homeschool, my online homeschool community. I'm going to be giving several live workshops there this fall, and I would love for you to join me inside. You can find that at humilityanddoxology.com/M2H. That's M, the number 2H. Okay, so moving on to your listener questions. This first one came in via Instagram, and it just made me laugh so much. I want to kick off with this because it is a very, very fun question. I have said, ask me anything about any topic, and I love that Joanna took me up on this. So Joanna says, you are helping set up for a church picnic and you're grabbing things out of the fridge. Someone brought store-bought potato salad. Are you the type to transfer it into a glass bowl, or do you just stick a spoon in it? Okay, well, you guys may judge me, but the truth of the matter is I will probably just stick a spoon in it. In my head, I want to be this amazing person who takes it out and puts it in a beautiful bowl and probably puts a little doily under it on the table. And the thing is that used to be me. I mean, especially when I was a teenager or a young mom, that was really important to me. And I had a lot of joy from doing things like that. I don't know if I'm just tired or grumpy or what, but probably tired. It's probably being tired. I just sort of stick things out on the table now. At home, I will take time and we'll have special occasions where I will take the time to do something more beautiful. But if it's just like a church dinner, I'm sticking the potato salad on the table. And then I have some friends who I know will come behind me and they will probably put it in a pretty bowl because they'll be like, I can't believe Amy put this out here in a plastic bowl. So maybe one day I will get back into just having sort of the emotional bandwidth to take the time to put it in a fancy bowl. But right now, the answer is I'll just stick a spoon in it. Hey there, homeschool mama. Are you feeling overwhelmed with keeping track of your lessons, schedules, and activities? I've got something just for you. Head over to humilityandoxology.com/free-homeschool-planner-calendar and grab your free homeschool planning calendar. Our planner is designed to help you stay organized and focused so you can spend more time enjoying the journey of homeschooling. From daily schedules to monthly calendars, it's everything you need to keep your homeschool running smoothly. And did I mention it's free? My free homeschool planner includes month-at-a-glance forms, week at a glance forms, so you can pick your top priorities each week, jot down meal ideas, and set your own personal reading goals. Day at a glance forms, including spots for common placing and habit tracking, reading logs for mom and the family, an annual homeschool attendance record, subject resource list to help you plan your homeschool curriculum, and a memory work log to help prioritize truth, goodness, and beauty in your homeschool day. Don't miss out. Download your free planner today and make your homeschooling experience more organized and less stressful. You can just click the link in the show notes. Happy planning! All right, the next question that came through is one from Kara. And she asked, how did you handle homeschooling while your kiddos were going through puberty? It seems like a lot of homeschool moms are hesitant to discuss this in order to protect their kids, which I understand, but general principles would be helpful. This is such a great question. I love it. Thank you for asking. And you're right, it can be difficult sometimes to share specifics online because we do want to protect our teens' privacy. It's one thing like when you're talking about the silly thing that your 2-year-old did, but it's just different. It just is when you're talking about a struggle of a 12-year-old. I will say that I have an episode coming out later this season interviewing my friend Cindy West about homeschooling the middle school years, the tweens and early teens. I think that episode will be helpful as well. But let's just sort of dive into this. First, I would just say, in my experience, the tween years can actually be harder than the teen years. And I think that was a little bit surprising to me how early some of the challenges began. And I think that is just normal. So it's good to know it's normal and there's nothing wrong with your kid. My kids know that I think 12 is one of the hardest ages. I'm glad I don't have to go back and be 12 again for that matter. Another just sort of piece of advice is to begin conversations early, both about the physical changes that will be going on in your child's body, as well as preparing them for the emotional feelings that may occur so that they're not taken aback, taken by surprise, and they're kind of prepared. And you have to just not be afraid to be awkward as the parent. In fact, I've even told my kids, like, this feels awkward to talk about, but it's really important to me. So I want you to know I may feel awkward, but I want to be able to talk to you about it, and it's okay if you feel awkward. You can always ask me anything. So begin those conversations maybe earlier than you think you need to, and then continue with the conversations through the years. It's also good to remember we all have tough days. As moms, we understand the impacts of our cycles each month on our emotions, our stamina, our mental stability at times. So it's good to not hold our teens and tweens to a higher standard than we hold ourselves. Of course, this doesn't excuse bad behavior any more than our bad behavior or emotionalism is excused when we take it out on other people. But it can give us grace and compassion as we're dealing with a poor tween or teen who's just getting bombarded by sudden, jolts of strange hormones in their body and they don't quite know what to do with them. Just remember that we all have tough days and to treat your children as you would want to be treated by your husband if you were having a tricky day. And also, it's good to remember the ultimate end of discipline. A lot of times these discussions sort of start with discipline and, making sure your kids remain committed to obedience and submitting to authority. And those things are, of course, important. But I think we want to remember that the end of discipline is actually not correcting an error necessarily, but it's training in righteousness. So the discipline that we give to our children primarily comes from us reminding them of who they are and whose they are, and then what that means for their life. So they don't actually get to come up with their own identity. They don't decide that. They are God's, and He has put His name on them, and that comes with responsibility. They are called to obey their Creator. So I think this most important part of discipline, whether we're talking about our toddlers or our teens, is this understanding of who they are and then reminding them of that truth and love. A few other kind of practical tips when it comes to homeschooling through puberty. Be flexible with sleep and the timing of when you do what subjects. They're going to need more sleep. If you notice someone is being extra grouchy or cannot seem to focus, they may just need a snack or a nap, kind of like your 3-year-old does. A subject that maybe before they used to want to do first thing in the morning, maybe now with their sleep changes, maybe it'll be better in the afternoon. So when it's feasible, actually give them more control over deciding which subjects to do when and how to organize their time. And of course, this also gives you the opportunity to train them in time management, prioritization, making to-do lists, all those good things. So we aren't Gnostics, right? We're not just minds and souls, we're bodies too. So when you think about a tween or teen going through puberty, consider what's going on with their sleep, whether they've moved their body, if they've spent time outdoors, if they're hydrated, if they're eating proper nutrition, and if they've had time with friends and family. Also, chocolate is always good. It's good to have an emergency stash of chocolate or whatever is your child's favorite treat. And sometimes just for no reason, maybe even when they don't deserve it, pass on that treat. And that goes along with that whole, even when they don't deserve it. Remember that God loved us when we were his enemies, and he does not treat us as our sins deserve. And I think about that as I think about how to treat my tweens and teens, especially in these difficult times of puberty. I want to treat them as God treats me. That doesn't mean letting them get away with sin, but it does mean being kind, loving, gracious, and often doing kindnesses for them when they least deserve it. That's really good for a relationship. Also, just remember that just because your teen or you are having a complete meltdown on any given day or even for long stretches of time, this does not necessarily mean you're doing anything wrong, and it doesn't mean you should just give up homeschooling and send your kids to school. Character issues and relationship struggles won't magically go away just if you send your kids to school. You'll just have less time to deal with them, and it will be easier for things to be hidden or pushed under the rug. So even though it's really, really hard to be faced with some of these struggles day in, day out, and to see them, just affecting and impacting every aspect of homeschool, let alone family life, just remember that's also the gift of homeschooling, that you are going to know your child's heart better than anyone else, and you'll be able to pray with and for them in a really unique, special way. That being said, outsourcing classes can be a great way to preserve relationships. I have a post about how to know when to outsource writing classes in particular. I also have a post about how to use online classes wisely. So, those are great tools as well. Having other mentors, other people who can speak into your teens' lives is really a gift. And it can just be a way you're finite as well as mom, right? You only have limited time and emotional energy. So, outsource classes if that is something that is a good fit for your family. And I'll put links to a lot of those resources in the show notes. Okay, we have a couple more pretty big questions here. This first one comes from Lindsay, and she says, what advice and encouragement would you give when it comes to being on the same page with my husband regarding homeschooling philosophy? She went on to say that their daughter is going into 8th grade this year, and her husband has concerns about them not preparing her well for college and future life. They think there are some areas in which the daughter seems to be behind her peers. So Lindsay went on to ask, is there a way to keep Charlotte Mason's style while at the same time incorporating a more traditional approach to satisfy my husband's idea of education? So this is sort of like a 2-part question, and so I'm going to give 2 parts to my answer. First, I would say that marriage is always more important than a particular homeschool philosophy. So never sacrifice a relationship with your spouse over educational ideals or curriculum choices. That being said, part of a healthy marriage is being able to come together with different points of view and find a place you can meet together. Sometimes this may look like a compromise or giving in of one person or the other, but often it looks more like finding creative solutions that meet both of your goals. So I would encourage you to first assess what is the real issue behind the issue. It's probably not just Charlotte Mason versus traditional schooling. It's probably not just, a given test score on a topic. What would your husband say are his top 2 or 3 goals of education? At the end of the year, he would feel like it had been a successful homeschool year if what? What are 2 or 3 non-academic goals he has for your daughter? And I think you should answer those same questions, but answer those 2 things separately and then come together and discuss them. These are actually some of the types of questions I suggest in my free homeschool planning guide for any family before they begin planning homeschool or buying curriculum. And you can grab that free homeschool planning guide at humilityanddoxology.com. But starting with these big picture questions will give a fundamental foundation as you move to the practical decisions that have to be made. So also ask yourself, what is it that you love about a Charlotte Mason education? Focus on wisdom, cultivating deep understanding, feasting on ideas, finding connections between subjects maybe. Are there ways you can prioritize these ideals in a way that may be a little outside the Charlotte Mason box, or maybe more like inside the traditional box? Because all or nothing doesn't generally work, especially if the 2 parents are coming at things from a different point of view. If you have concerns that what you've been doing so far isn't working the best, don't throw out all your Charlotte Mason dreams and replace them with a public school model that you said in your original email hadn't prepared you and your husband well. Instead, try to find new approaches or ways of learning that keep your priorities intact while perhaps pursuing them in different ways. So that's sort of like the first part of the answer. That's more like the big picture answer here. But the second part is also important, and this is more focused specifically on the question as it relates to Charlotte Mason education. I would definitely say that a rich, classical Charlotte Mason education provides a rigorous and idea-based education that can inspire and challenge a teen. I have a previous interview actually with Jamie Marstall all about Charlotte Mason education in high school, as well as several other previous episodes related to this topic, and I will put those in the show notes. The children of some of the people I've interviewed who have used Charlotte Mason throughout their high school have gone on to careers like medicine, writing, teaching, and more. Things like Plutarch, dense literature, challenging science and math, exams every quarter, and lengthy writing assignments are definitely the opposite of an easy approach to education. I will put some resources for Charlotte Mason exams that are definitely challenging in the show notes, but there's no rule that says you can't include multiple choice or fill-in-the-blank questions on the exams you give in your homeschool if that's important to you and your husband. This is your homeschool. You can do whatever you want. There are no Charlotte Mason. There are no homeschool police. All right, the final question. When do you know it's time to get outside help when your child is struggling with certain subjects or areas within a subject? And how do you go about finding that help? The reader went on to mention specifically math and science as areas where her daughter is testing below average, and mentioned that her daughter doesn't seem to be able to retain the information she learns through the year, even if she seems to be doing fine, making A's or B's on math tests on a daily basis. She also struggles with problem solving, word problems, and just sort of that deeper level of mathematical reasoning. So this is going to be another two-part answer. So in general, I am a big fan of accepting help. And we have outsourced many classes with my teens over the years, whether because I'm unable to teach the material. I mean, hello, calculus. I quit teaching at pre-calc. Or maybe we have found it better for our relationship. I'm very thankful for some of the amazing writing teachers that my teens have learned from. And sometimes just because a child requests it. I mentioned that in my introduction, talking about one of my children who requested several outsourced classes this year. So there are also many tutors available for specific subjects when that is needed. I have a couple of in-person local friends who are homeschooling moms who actually are also math tutors. So just sort of in general, if there's a subject you feel would benefit from outside tutoring, you don't have to worry about, asking for help or like, oh, that means I failed my kid or I'm not doing a good enough job homeschooling. Like we all need help sometimes, right? And sometimes a different point of view can help our child in a way that we are unable to provide. So if you think that a child would benefit from outside tutoring, just as a general rule for any subject, you can check your local homeschool support groups, your state homeschool organization, homeschool local Facebook groups, or just ask local friends to see if anyone has recommendations for someone who will support you in your homeschooling goals while also giving outside support. So never be afraid to ask for help. And I think that humility can serve our children and ourselves well. But some specific advice for the math part of the question, I actually reached out to my friend Kate Snow, who many of you know as the author of Math with Confidence, and she suggested looking for upper elementary bar modeling workbooks, no matter how old your daughter is. Bar modeling workbooks. This would help her develop a better understanding of the meaning of basic operations, and bar models are great for developing more robust mental models for those basic operations. If you need help retaining the math facts themselves, Kate also has some great math facts that stick books, and I'll put links to those in the show notes. I would also personally recommend Challenge Math and Becoming a Problem-Solving Genius by Edward Zaccaro. I'll put the link to those in the show notes as well. These will tremendously help with mathematical reasoning. I actually had a couple of my kids use these books as a transition from like elementary and middle school math to high school math. It really forces you not just to regurgitate information or answer problems on a worksheet, but to think through what is actually being required by the problem. So if your child is struggling with word problems, mathematical reasoning, or just sort of translating, the facts they know into real life situations, I would highly recommend those two books. My final recommendation is to look at the Keys to series. There's like Keys to Decimals, Key to Percents, and these are really small workbooks that give focused teaching and practice on some fundamentals a child may need extra help on. I found those to have been tremendously helpful. I think we've used the decimals, percents, maybe fractions, maybe geometry as well. We haven't necessarily used every workbook in each series, but you can pick and choose the books that will be most applicable for your child. They're really thin, they're not very expensive, and they can be really great for extra practice and reinforcement. Oh, I lied. I said that was the last question, but I forgot there was one more. And this was a question from Katie. She asked this in Made to Homeschool, and she says, Amy, I want to know what school subjects or curriculums did you think you would never teach, but you ended up teaching, and why? So interestingly, the first two things that come to mind were actually things I thought I would do that we didn't do that have really surprised me. So I know that wasn't exactly what Katie asked, but I'll just go ahead and tell you anyway. I think it really surprised me that we ended up quitting Latin with my teens. This was something I just assumed we would do all the way through high school graduation. It is a subject I enjoyed, and I actually know Latin fairly well, so it's not as tricky for me to teach as some other subjects. My oldest son did go through Latin high school 3, level 3 level, but my oldest daughter my oldest two daughters both stopped taking Latin after the first level of high school Latin and moved on to modern languages. And that's been a good fit for them. It was a good thing for them. In fact, my oldest daughter now says she wished she hadn't quit Latin and she's going to start learning it herself again. But I think that really surprised me. I had to love my actual children that I had instead of my ideal homeschool plan. I also had assumed that we would have a lot more informal kind of co-op or group classes, fun with friends, especially in the younger years. That had been my experience as a homeschooled student, but those things just are really hard to find, at least in my area. There's a lot of formal co-ops, a lot of formal like all-day co-ops where you kind of sign up and you take lots of classes or, things like classical conversation. And those things aren't bad, but they just weren't what our family was really looking for, especially in the younger years. And so that had some lonely times where things, I had assumed we would do fun projects with other families, and we ended up just doing them on our own. And that was okay too. But I think that was a kind of a surprise to me and a change in the vision I had before, I started homeschooling and just the realities of the past few years. And I guess that just goes to remind us all that a good homeschool is not necessarily going to look the way you think it is going to look. Just because it ends up differently than you anticipated doesn't mean it's bad. So sometimes you just have to go with the flow, go with the realities of the life that you have, the children you have, the resources you have of time and money, and then live in joy right there where you are. But there is one curriculum I never thought I would teach, but I did end up teaching, and that is Saxon math. I hated Saxon math when I was a student. I despised it. It was so boring to me. But, my husband had a different experience. He said he really enjoyed doing Saxon math in his homeschool years. And it turned out to be a good fit for some of the levels for a couple of my children. And so it cracked me up to no end to hand them that Saxon book and have them do all of those problems. Well, actually, I never made them do all the problems. But it did kind of make me laugh that the curriculum I had hated so violently, they ended up it being a good fit for them. So I think that is how I would answer that question. Saxon math, you either love it or you hate it. But if it's good for you, it's really good. Well, thank you to everyone who sent questions in. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed and listened to the podcast for the past 9 seasons. I cannot believe this. We are way over 100 episodes at this point. I forgot to write down the exact number before I started recording, but I'm really looking forward to coming to your earbuds at least every other week. I don't know. I might try to do every week this year. We'll see. Some of that is going to have to depend on my life circumstances. But I hope that you will be subscribed so you don't miss the episodes when they come out on Mondays, that you will follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube at Humility and Doxology, that you'll consider joining my online homeschool community, Made to Homeschool, and just kind of stay in touch. I would love to hear from you. You're always welcome to send me an email at amy@humilityanddoxology.com or send me a DM via social media. Instagram is probably best for that. You also may want to check out the brand new free homeschool planner calendar printable I have. This is a perfect time to grab that here at the beginning of the homeschool year. I have that available on my website, humility-and-doxology.com/free-homeschool-planner-calendar. I know that's kind of a long one, but I will put the link in the show notes. And make sure you are as well subscribed to my email list. Each Monday, I send out an email, and it includes a weekly poem, plus more homeschool encouragement and resources for you. Occasionally, another email will come out, but it's that Monday email that many people say they really look forward to and enjoy, especially the poem. Thank you again so much for being here with me on the podcast today for this kind of different and unique episode, different than what I've done in the past. And until next time, happy homeschooling. Thanks for listening in on this week's Homeschool Conversation. For show notes and links to all the resources we discussed, head to humilityanddoxology.com/homeschool-conversations. And if these episodes are an encouragement to you, Would you take a moment to leave a rating and review and to share with your friends? I am so thankful that you are here on this adventure with me. Let's repent of our constant striving, relish the joy of learning, and rest in the work of Christ on our behalf. Stand fast, my friends.